Okay, in order to talk about plants, which we're beginning our botany or our plant unit now, we need to talk a little bit about how plants evolved and how different they are. First of all, what are plants? They are multicellular and they're photosynthetic eukaryotes. And the way plants evolved is marked by adaptations that made it possible for them to live on land. And living on land has certain advantages. First of all, there's plenty of light for photosynthesis, and it's easier for carbon dioxide to diffuse from air than in water, and there are higher concentrations of carbon dioxide in the air. But it took some adaptations for them to live in this land environment. They had to have some way to keep from drying out or becoming desiccated. And so they developed seeds so that their embryos would be enclosed within the seed and they'd have food in that seed coat as well. Now, why is living in water beneficial? First of all, there's plenty of water. And secondly, it supports the body of the plant. But as we know, we have more plants on land than we do in water, so they had to adapt. One of the things they did is they have a body that is covered by a waxy cuticle. This seals them. It allows carbon dioxide and oxygen to move in and out so photosynthesis can occur, but it keeps them from losing too much water. Also, some of the plants developed a vascular system, a system of tubes that carry food and water throughout the plant. But when we talk about the evolution of plants, we need to look at the 6 evolutionary events that are associated with the 4 major groups of plants. And if you look on page 92, that shows the sequence in which land plants evolved adaptive features for existence on land. Looking at group 1, our non-vascular plants. This is where we had the beginning of nourishment of the multicellular embryo within the body of the female plant. Our second group is seedless vascular plants. This is where we see the vascular tissue or the tubes that transport the water and the food. Then we had gymnosperms and angiosperms come along for group 3, and of course they produce seeds to protect their embryo and provide it with nourishments. And then we had our flowering plants that came along that attract pollinators and produce food groups. So these are the 4 major groups of plants: non-vascular plants, seedless vascular, gymnosperms and angiosperms, and flowering plants. This is what I asked you to look at in your book a few minutes ago, and you can see the 4 groups and how they developed these adaptations to help them survive better. Now, if we look at alteration of generations, this is just 2 alternating forms in the course of its life cycle. And we have these multicellular haploid individuals called gametophytes, and they produce multicellular diploid individuals called sporophytes. And then the sporophytes turn around and produce the gametophytes. So it just alternates between the 2 generations. The sporophyte, as we said, is diploid. It produces spores by meiosis, and that spore is the haploid cell that becomes the gametophyte. And then the gametophyte that's haploid produces the gametes. And the gametes fuse in fertilization and produce the zygote, and the zygote is the diploid cell that becomes the sporophyte. So you see how the generations alternate here. And this is also in your textbook. You see at the top the sporophyte, which is diploid, that will produce with sporangium the spores that are haploid that will produce the gametophyte. And then you have fertilization of the gametes producing the zygote, which becomes the sporophyte, and the sporophyte produces the spores, which produce the gametophyte, and you see how it just alternates as you go through. Also, if you look here, at the top in the blue is the sporophyte generation, and at the bottom in the beige color is the gametophyte. And you see, as the size of the sporophytes gets bigger, the gametophytes get smaller. Now, there are some other adaptations to living on land. First of all, the prevention of desiccation of the zygote and the embryo. Also, the diploid sporophyte generation produces one or several multicellular sporangium that produce the spores by meiosis, and then the spores become the haploid gametophyte, which then bears the multicellular gametangium. And the gametangium for a male is called the antheridium, and for a female it's called the archegonium. We also have the waxy cuticle that keeps them from losing water. This is kind of a review. We have stomata, which are little tiny openings on the underside of the leaves that helps with gas exchange. And there's also apical tissue that can develop and produce complex organs and tissues. These are all terrestrial adaptations that helps them to be better able to survive on the land.